literally means 1,000 years. One moment. In English, it's best rendered as a once-in-a-millennium opportunity or a once-in-a-lifetime chance. It describes an event or opening so rare that it's almost unimaginable, something that may come only once in many generations. The phrase carries both wonder and pressure when such a moment appears. People feel the urgency to act because the window is incredibly small and unlikely to return. The one short hour. On a Wednesday that smelled faintly of rain and leftover espresso. Mira missed the 8:10 train by 2 minutes. 8:10. The platform was crowded with commuters who had perfected the art of walking fast and looking sincere. People who moved as if they were always late to some small but crucial appointment with their own lives. Mira stood back, phone in hand, listening to a voice message from a client asking for a revision that could have waited until Friday. She deleted the message, closed her eyes, and decided to wait for the next train. 3 stops later, she stepped out into a neighborhood she'd never visited, an old part of the city where the glass towers on the horizon bowed politely to brick facades and narrow alleys. A mural of a woman with kaleidoscope hair leaned over a corner, watching a barista hand a child a free croissant. Mira walked without a plan and found herself in front of a small community center with a notice board full of flyers, language classes, a film screening, a call for volunteers to help build a rooftop garden. One paper, pinned with a faded stamp. Read simply, 1 hour reading and conversation, tomorrow at 6 p.m. 6. She almost walked on. Then she thought of the message now sitting on her desk at the office. The routine of edits and meetings that had promised stability and polite smiles. She had been circling the same projects for 2 years, competent, predictable, quietly boxed in. For a month she had woken up wanting something that felt like meaning, but didn't know the shape of it. So she wrote the event's address on the corner of her hand and promised herself 1 hour. The room the next evening was the kind of modest, mismatched chairs, warm yellow bulbs, a kettle always within reach. 10 people gathered. Ages and accents like a small, honest mosaic. An older man with an engineer's hands read a short sci-fi story and asked a question about whether technology could ever replace regret. A teenager with blue sneakers argued that regret is inevitable, therefore useful. Conversations spun into dinners, into memories, into tangents about unfinished songs and abandoned hobbies. Mira listened, surprised to find how easily she could speak about the tiny, stubborn things she loved, the way she arranged light along her windowsill, the private rituals she performed before starting a painting, the one line of a poem she'd memorized at 20. An hour passed, then another. The host, a woman named Lila, lit a candle and said, "Time for the last activity. Tell us about a moment you wish you hadn't missed." Faces shifted. Someone laughed. Mira kept quiet. She could have told them about the missed train that had led her here. It seemed too tidy an anecdote for the feeling that had been growing under her ribs, the sense that something broader, more like a hinge, had shifted. After the session, Lila came up to her. "We're running a project, a pop-up exhibition for community stories. We need a coordinator who can handle partnerships and a website. I heard you say you like arranging light along windowsills." She smiled in the way people do when they mean both kindness and proposition. "You'd be perfect. Can you come in tomorrow morning for a quick brainstorm?" Mira felt a familiar Mira. Old part of her mind tally the costs, current clients, income certainty, the flatmate's rent due next week. She told herself no. That 1 hour couldn't append the arithmetic of life. But another part, the part that had been sharpened by nights spent sketching and days answering emails, leaned forward. The phrase she'd read somewhere the previous month buzzed in her head. Borrowed from an old language class, 1,000 years. One moment. She had always thought it romantic. Impossible. Now it hummed like a fine wire. She agreed to come. The morning meeting was brisk. They showed her pictures of the alleyways they wanted to use, the artists who would participate, the local bakers willing to donate pastries. They spoke of creating a space where ordinary stories lived on footnotes and front steps. Mira found herself sketching a layout on a napkin and then, to her own surprise, sending 20 emails that afternoon, to printers 20, to an acquaintance who ran a small press, to the municipal permit office. People answered. The world, for once, answered back. Over the next 6 weeks, Mira worked like someone learning a new instrument. She learned how to make a budget that made sense to a bank and how to ask a street vendor for a discount without losing charm. She woke at dawn to check supplier schedules, took calls while standing in line for coffee, and spent late nights designing a simple website that felt honest. She discovered old talents she'd masked beneath pragmatism, an eye for layout, a way with words that could make donations sound both urgent and attainable. The project grew because the people who cared about it were quietly abundant. On opening night, a neighbor came with a postcard from the 1970s and asked Mira if he could pin it to the board. 2070. A child traced the contour of a borrowed photograph and declared it very brave. A retired teacher read a letter she'd written to her younger self and watched, with a small, astonished smile, as a stranger wept. Lila hugged Mira in the middle of the street and said, "You moved like the world wanted you to." Months later, when things had settled into a new rhythm, part freelance work, part community projects, part evenings spent teaching a small class at the center, Mira found herself in front of a window, arranging light along the sill. The view was different now. Instead of glass towers that represented contract deadlines, the street below had grown a habit of stopping. Neighbors waved. A student she had mentored sold a small zine at a market stall. Someone left a note thanking her for organizing a workshop where they had told their first story aloud. There were disappointments too. Not every pitch succeeded. Some partnerships dissolved. Some people she wanted to help didn't come. There were financial scrapes and the usual domestic clutter. But the shape of her days had changed. It felt less like moving along a conveyor belt and more like navigating a garden where one chooses which paths to tend. One evening, Mira visited the notice board and found another flyer. 1 hour reading and conversation next Wednesday at 6 p.m. 6. She smiled, folded the paper, and tucked it in her pocket. Thinking about the missed train that had rerouted her life, the thought that a single hour could carry the weight of 1,000 years no longer felt exaggerated. It was a private map, those rare, sharp openings that arrive suddenly and ask you to choose. What, then, is the wisdom of a once-in-a-millennium moment? Mira believed it was not about heroics or performing at a critical instant. It was about attention and readiness. Opportunities, even the rarest, do not magically assign meaning. They are invitations to bring what you already are toward what is needed. Some will pass without consequence. Others will unfurl into work that matters because you said yes. That realization made her kinder to herself on mornings she woke without clarity. She learned to practice small acts of openness, answering an email with curiosity rather than autopilot, learning to say no to things that ate time without nourishment, accepting that risk could be measured in steps rather than leaps. She began to keep a list of tiny doors she might open: a class to audit, a phone call to someone she admired, a volunteer shift. Each entry was not a guarantee of a miracle, but a way to be present when something rare did arrive. Years later, when someone asked her for advice about taking chances, she would tell them this: treat the rare moments like seeds, not fireworks. When the chance comes, what matters most is not that it came, it matters that you're willing to plant. She would say it calmly, as if offering a small utensil, a trowel, a map. People nodded, then went back to their lists. Some followed the advice. Some didn't. Life continued, messy and luminous in equal measure. On an ordinary afternoon, Mira caught the 8:10 train again, on purpose this time. 8:10. She rode it to a stop she knew the way to and walked past the mural and the barista and the community board with the old flyer still pinned. She held in her pocket a postcard with a child's drawing from the market, its colors smudged and honest. The city moved forward as cities do, indifferent in scale, precise in detail. She watched the faces in the carriage, each carrying possibilities small and large. In that brief, moving hour, she felt the steady pulse of all the moments that had come before and the ones that might yet arrive. 1,000 years. One moment is not a spell that guarantees perfection. It is a lens that asks you to notice when rare openings appear. Bring both courage and care. Plant the seed. Water what grows.